All right, what's going on, guys? Going to be our summary of markets week 38, and then we're going to go over the options watch list after that. So we're going to get started here with SPY. If you guys haven't already, you can check out the last week's video. Pretty much everything we talked about came true. For the most part, SPY, we were looking at this lower gap around 343 to 341 as the lower support that it looked like price was going to come down and test. As we see here, this was when we made the last week's video, was this candle here. I said that this was pretty bearish because you were pulling back to retest that rising wedge, and you didn't really have any follow through to the upside, and you were closing very bearish on the 1 hour. So I told you guys to look out for that target around that gap. We actually took this trade in Discord. If you guys were in the Discord, we took a butterfly for this lower price here, and we made about 150% on that butterfly. And then once it started to find support, we took another trade on this. I sold some premium on this, so we are selling puts lower. So if it goes up, we make money. We're already up about 50% on that premium. We made 40% on that in one day, so it's looking really good for our puts that we sold. I also sold some puts on Qs as well, so this pullback to support, I am definitely a buyer. We sold the puts, which is basically the same thing as buying the dip. So I'm expecting this to go higher. As long as this support holds, this should go back into the 350 range, 353, 355, and then we should break out higher, as long as we don't have bad news. So the news, we are going to be very sensitive to news for the next month or two because of the election, right? So we have the election, we have the stimulus news. We are going to be very sensitive, even more so than we have been recently. So be on the lookout for big headlines. But fundamentals aside, this looks extremely bullish. This should go higher. Looking at this level, if you zoom out even further, where we are finding support is the previous all-time high. So we have the previous all-time high. If I draw a line from this level, you can see that we are finding support right on a retest of that level. Okay, so this is extremely bullish. So keep an eye on that. I think we will go higher. Let me get rid of these old setups here. Let's clean the chart up. This gap is no longer there. We filled the gap. So the only remaining gap that we have below us, I believe, is this one. And then this is like a little micro gap if you don't count the wicks. These gaps will most likely not be tested unless we have bad election news or bad stimulus news. These will most likely not be tested. So if we go down to a lower time frame here and we look at this kind of a recent downtrend, look at what we're doing here. Created the downtrend, retested, and now we're breaking. Okay, so like I said, fundamentals aside, there is no reason to be bearish here. I would not be bearish until we break back below like 342 to 340. Okay, keep an eye on that. Targets above 353, 354. Moving on to gold. Gold is doing absolutely nothing. As we talked about last week, the week before, it's just waiting for stimulus news. So I wouldn't really trade gold here. There's just no direction. It's just consolidating. If you really wanted to pick a direction, this is slightly bearish because you're kind of putting in a bear flag. So if you did want to pick a direction, it most likely would go down here. But there really is no clear setup here, so I wouldn't put my money on it. But if it does want to go down, watch 1810. If it wants to go up, watch this pivot around 1950. You reclaim that pivot, you got targets around 1993 and then 2039. All right, moving on to oil. Oil basically hasn't done anything since our last week's video. We talked about the bulldog forming that head. We're still kind of forming that head. You have a massive head on this bulldog. Typically, the heads are not that long. We don't have that long of a consolidation, but it's still forming that head until the bottom of the head or the top of the head is broken. There is no trade here. So if you break above like 4150, you should get 4274. You break below around 39, you should get 3784, then 3679. Okay, so no direction right now. Just keep an eye on that range that we're currently in. Okay, looking at Bitcoin, massive breakout from last week's video. We had that bulldog playing out. You're putting in that little miniature bull flag like I talked about last week. I told you guys that it was still bullish. Look for 11.9 to 12,000 as your target. You easily blew through that target, and now we're exploding upward. If we look at the weekly here, you put in a new 2020 high, so this is the high of 2020. You are almost breaking the high of 2019. So keep an eye on the high of 2019, which is around 13.9. And then we also have a monthly level right basically exactly where that is. We have a monthly pivot right around 13.9 as well. So that is your target moving forward. If you guys are still in longs, I would probably not enter a long here unless you stayed above this pivot for a day or two. We are holding this pivot currently, but this is pretty extended. Look at how far away it is from that OTS trail. So you're really extended currently. It does look really good on the short time frames, like the 4 hour, 1 hour. This is a little bear div playing out. So you had a 4 hour bear div. You are playing out. You did hit your target. So I typically look for the trail as your divergence target. So you hit your target, and now you're kind of consolidating. If this starts to turn green on the OTS again, and you see some momentum on the Momo, this most likely will go higher into that upper target, okay? If we turn red on the 4 hour and we break the OTS trail to the downside, as long as the momentum is bearish, you probably will pull back closer to like 12.6 to 12.3, okay? So watch out for like this little area back before this this initial impulse here. Or the secondary impulse, I should say. So that would be kind of my lower zone of support that I'd be looking for. But as long as it holds the trail here, this could definitely continue higher. So I wouldn't FOMO here, but if you are holding, it looks like it could go up. Same thing with Ethereum, very bullish, massive breakout of this range. You broke 391, you went higher, you still have a target around 438 that you have not hit. If we go to a lower time frame here, basically the same thing. You're seeing a little bit of a pullback. It's a little deeper than Bitcoin, so you are turning red on the OTS, but you have a bunch of buy signals coming in because you're not able to get lower than this OTS trail. So if you don't push below this trail here and you start climbing back above like 410, 416, very easy target, and then you probably will head into that 438, okay? If you do start to push downward, watch that 50 moving average, watch this pivot around 390 that could act as support. But all right, that is the summary of markets. Let's move on to the options watch list. So as I said, SPY and Qs pulling back to retest the neckline, bouncing off support. So it should be a bullish week. We'll keep an eye on it. So let's take a look at some things that could run next week. So NIO still pulling back. If it gets back above this pivot around 28.20, it could go higher. But I'm finally out of NIO. So no trades on NIO currently. I'm waiting for either a deep pullback or a longer consolidation. AMD I was bullish on, but then we broke this massive uptrend, so I closed my position. If you start to reclaim this uptrend around like 84, then it could go higher into the 90s. So keep an eye on that. Be on the lookout for 84 to be reclaimed. Anything below that, not really worried about it. DraftKings, I'm still waiting for DraftKings to either test the $40 range or find a lot of support above this 15-minute cloud. So you finally flipped the 50-minute cloud as we were waiting for. You can see if we zoom out, you've been losing this cloud all the way down. We finally are flipping the cloud bullish, and we're kind of coming in for our first bullish pattern above that cloud. So if this starts to break out on Monday, we could sell some like $40 puts or lower to play the breakout. Moving on to Walmart, same thing with AMD. I was bullish on Walmart, but you failed the trend. You're kind of putting in a little consolidation here. If you break back above this little downtrend here and you get above that pivot, this thing could run. Until then, I'm not really looking at it. NVIDIA, we took a trade on NVIDIA. It looks really bullish. We sold some puts. You're breaking a falling wedge to the upside, which is really good. You have the 50-day moving or sorry, the 50 moving average on the 4-hour holding as support. So this looks like it wants to go higher for sure. I'm looking for like 550 to 560 on NVIDIA for next week. Starbucks, we took a trade on Starbucks. We actually closed it for a small loss. If I would have held on to it towards the close, we would have made a killing on this trade, probably like 100, 150%, because it was a butterfly. I closed it a little early, around break even, so a small loss on that. But I still think Starbucks can go higher if you find value above this like 91 range. 92 would be pretty easy, and then 95 should be the upper target. All right, moving on to big tech. Microsoft looks fantastic. I would have taken a trade on Microsoft, but it has earnings. So I don't trade earnings. I don't like trading this close to earnings, so I'm avoiding it. I'm just playing the cues. So if it goes up, it'll help me anyway. But if you guys were looking for a trade on Microsoft, you are holding the range high here as support. You're back above this 216 resistance. You should start to slowly climb back into 223. And it could put in kind of like a little makeshift cup and handle here. So watch out for that. The overall target would be that pivot. So Apple is a little sketchy here because you have been so bearish the past week, but you are pulling back to retest this inverse head and shoulders. If you do break this little micro downtrend here, we go to like a smaller time frame. You can see there is a little downtrend here. If you do break this level, this could go a lot higher into like 120, 125 pivot. So keep an eye on that. If it breaks this neckline to the downside, below like 112 is very bearish. You have a little bit of support at 110, but then it could go a lot lower. Keep an eye on that. Facebook, you hit our 282 target and you broke above this level. As I said in Discord, if you held this pivot, you were going to go higher. Okay, so we have a couple of guys playing Facebook. You guys have really good entries. If it stays above 282, it looks really good to hit 290. Okay, get below 282, you'll probably retest that pivot. Netflix, we had bad earnings, but you have been holding this pivot. So if you are looking for kind of a buy the dip scenario, as long as it holds this pivot, this could be bullish. And your stop loss would be very, very obvious, just right below that pivot. So as long as you hold that, it should go higher, maybe even a partial fill of this gap. Moving on to Amazon, you are still hovering right around the top of that range. Until you reclaim the top of that range, this is still bearish. So I wouldn't be bullish on Amazon until you get back above like 3290, 3300. Tesla had a very disappointing earnings. I think it beat earnings, but you just didn't really have any momentum afterwards. You are still holding that 50-day moving average, which you have not lost since you basically broke out from the lows. So it still looks slightly bullish, but I would not take a very bullish trade on this until you reclaim 450, and then 475 would be your upper target. Support around 375. But all right, guys, that is the summary markets and our options watch list. Hopefully this helped you guys out. If you guys like the video, make sure to like the video, and I will see you guys tomorrow in Discord. Have a good one. Peace.